Good day, sir. We are the Group 2, and our topic is all about the Iccpr, or the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The Iccpr has its roots in the same process that led to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. A declaration on the essential rights of man had been proposed in the 1945 San Francisco Conference, which led to the founding of the United Nations, and the Economic and Social Council was given the task of drafting it. Early on this process, the document was split into a declaration setting from general principles of human rights and a convention or covenant containing binding commitments. The former evolved into the UDHR and was adopted on December 10, 1948. Drafting continued on the convention, but there remain significant differences between UN members on the relative importance of negative civil and political versus economic, social, and cultural rights. This eventually caused the convention to be split into two separate covenants. One contained the civil political rights, and the other to contain economic, social, and cultural rights. The two covenants were to contain as many similar provisions as possible and be opened or signature simultaneously. Each would also contain an article on the right of all people to self-determination. The first document became the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the second, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The drafts were presented to the UN General Assembly for discussion in 1954 and adopted in 1966. As a result of diplomatic negotiations, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights was adopted shortly before the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Together, the UDHR and the two covenants considered to be the foundational human rights text in the contemporary international system of human rights.
The covenant follows the structures of UDHR and Iccpr with a preamble and including 3 articles divided into 6 parts. Article 1 recognizes the right of all people to self-determination, including the right to freely determine their political status, pursue their economic, social, and cultural goals, and manage and dispose of their own resources. It recognizes a negative right of a people not to be deprived of its means of subsistence and impose an obligation on those parties still responsible for non-self-governing and trust terrorist colonies to encourage and respect their self-determination. Part 2, Article 2 to 5, obliges parties to legislative where necessary to give effect to the right recognized in the covenant and to provide an effective legal remedy for any violation of those rights. It also requires the right to be recognized without distinction of any kind such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status, and to ensure that they are enjoyed equally by women. The right can only be limited in time of public emergency, which threatens the life of the nation. And even there's no derogation permitted from the rights to life, freedom from torture and slavery, the freedom from retrospective law, the right to personhood, and freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and freedom from medical and scientific experimentation without consent.
Part 3. List the rights themselves. These include rights to Article 6, 7, and 8, physical integrity in the form of the right to life and freedom from torture and slavery. Article 9 to 11, liberty and security of the person, in the form of freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention and the right to habeas corpus. Article 14, 15, and 16, procedural fairness in law, in the form of right due to process, a fair and impartial trial, the presumption of innocence, and recognition as a person before the law. Article 12, 13, 17, and 24, individual liberty in the form of the freedom of movement, thought, conscience, and religion, speech, association and assembly, family rights, the rights to nationality, and the right to privacy. Article 20, prohibition by law of any propaganda for war as well as any advocacy of national or religion hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility, or violence. Article 25, political participation, including the right to vote. Article 26 and 27, non-discrimination, minority rights, and equality before the law.
Part 4, Article 2845, governs the establishment and operation of the Human Rights Committee and the reporting and monitoring of the Covenant. It also allows parties to recognize the competence and of committee to resolve dispute between parties on the implementation of the Covenant, Article 41 and 42. Part 5, Article 46 to 47 clarifies that the Covenant shall not be interpreted as interfering with the operation of the United Nations of the inherent rights of all peoples to enjoy and utilize fully and freely their natural wealth and resources. Part 6, Articles 48-58 governs ratification, entry into forces, and amendment of the Covenant.
Right to physical integrity. Article 6 of the Covenant recognizes the individual's inherent right to life and requires it to be protected by law. It is a supreme right from which no degradation can be permitted and must be interpreted widely. It therefore requires parties to take positive measures to reduce infant mortality and increase life expectancy, as well as forbidding arbitrary killing by security forces. While Article 6 does not prohibit the death penalty, it restricts its application to the most serious crimes and forbids it to be used on children and pregnant women, or in a manner contrary to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. The UN Human Rights Committee interprets the article as strongly suggestion that abolition is desirable and regards any progress towards abolition of the death penalty as advancing these rights. The second optional protocol commits its signatories to the abolition of the death penalty with the holders.
Article 7 prohibits torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading punishment and non-consensual medical or scientific experimentation. As with Article 6, it cannot be degraded from under any circumstance. The article is now interpreted to impose similar obligation to those required by the United Nations Convention against Torture, including not just prohibition of torture, but active measures to prevent its use and prohibition on refoulement. Response to Nazi human exploitation during World War II, the article explicitly includes a provision on medical and scientific experimentation without consent. Article 8 prohibits slavery and enforced servitude in all situations. The article also prohibits forced labor, with exception of criminal punishment, military service, and civil obligation.
Liberty and security of a person. Article 9 recognizes the rights to liberty and security of the person. It prohibits arbitrary arrest and detention, requires any deprivation of liberty to be according to the law, and obliges the parties to allow those deprived of their liberty to challenge their imprisonment through the court. Those provisions and apply not just to those in prison as part of the criminal process but also to those detained due to mental illness, drug addiction, or for the education or immigration purposes. Article 9.3 and 9.4 impose the procedural safeguard around the arrest, requiring anyone arrested to be promptly informed of the charge against them and to be brought promptly before a judge. It is also restrict the use of pre-trial detention, requiring that is not be the general rules.
Article 10 requires anyone deprived of liberty to be treated with dignity and humanity. This applies not just to prisoners but also to those detained for immigration purposes of psychiatric care. The right complements the Article 7, prohibition on torture and cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment. The article also imposes specific obligations around criminal justice, requiring prisoners in the trial detention to be separated from convicted prisoners and children to be separated from adults. It requires prisons to be focused on reform and rehabilitation rather than punishment. Article 11. No one shall be imprisoned merely on the ground of inability to fulfill a contractual obligation. The state parties to the present covenant recognize the right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to continuous improving of living conditions.
Procedural fairness and rights of the accused. Article 14 recognizes and protects a right to justice and a fair trial. Article 14.1 establishes the ground rules. Everyone must be equal before the courts, and any hearing must take place in open court before a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal, with any judgment or ruling made public. Closed hearings are only permitted for reasons of privacy, justice, or national security, and judgments may only be suppressed in divorce cases or to protect the interests of children. These obligations apply to both criminal and civil hearings, and to all courts and tribunals. Article 14.3 mandates that litigants must be informed promptly and in detail in a language which they understand. In Article 14, all persons shall be equal before the courts and tribunals. In the determination of any criminal charge against him, or of his rights and obligations in a suit at law, everyone shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing by a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal established by law. The press and public may be excluded from all or part of a trial for reasons of morals, public order, or national security in a democratic society, or when the interests of the private lives of the parties so requires, or to the extent strictly necessary in the opinion of the court in special circumstances where publicity would prejudice the interests of justice. But any judgment rendered in a criminal case or in a suit at law shall be made public except where the interest of juvenile persons otherwise requires, or the proceedings concern matrimonial disputes or the guardianship of children. The rest of the article imposes specific and detailed obligations around the process of criminal trials in order to protect the rights
of the accused and the right of a fair trial. It establishes the presumption of innocence and forbids double jeopardy. It requires that those convicted of a crime be allowed to appeal to a higher tribunal, and requires victims of a miscarriage of justice to be compensated. It establishes right to a speedy trial, to counsel against self-incrimination, and for the accused to be present and call and examine witnesses.
Article 15 prohibits prosecution under ex post facto law and the imposition of retrospective criminal penalties and requires the imposition of the lesser penalty where criminal sentences have changed between the offense and conviction. One exceptional is criminal proceedings held for violations of peremptory norms or hostages under customary international law such as genocide, slavery, torture, and wars of aggression. Article 16 requires states to recognize everyone as a person before the law. Article 15 refers to a specific provision in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This article states that has the right to a nationality and that no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of their nationality. It emphasizes that individuals should not be denied their citizenship based on factors such as race, religion, or gender. The purpose of Article 15 is to protect individuals from statelessness and ensure that everyone has a legal identity and access to basic rights and prosecutions within their respective countries. Article 16 to a specific provision in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This article states that men and women have the right to marry and to found a family. It further highlights that marriage should be entered into with the free and full consent of both parties involved. Article 16 also recognizes that the family has the natural and fundamental unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and state.
Individual liberties. Article 12 guarantees freedom of movement, including the right of person to choose their residence, to live, and to return to a country. These rights apply to legal aliens as well as citizens of a state, and can be restricted only where necessary to protect national security, public order or health, and the right and freedom of others. The article also recognizes a right of people to enter their own country, the right to return. The Human Rights Committee interprets this right broadly as applying not just to citizens but also to those stripped of or denied their nationality. They also regard it as near absolute. There are few, if any, circumstances in which deprivation of the right to enter one's own country could be reasonable. Sa Article 12, like for example, ikaw intahay ka nang muadto kag laing lugar or nasod nya mupuyo ka ngadto, na kay rights nga mupuyo adto nya, nasod kay rights nga mubalik sa imong lugar kung di sa kagikan. Pwede rasad sila maghigpit kung kailangan para maproteksyonan ang ilang lugar o seguridad, kaayusan, kalusugan sa publiko, kadapatan ug kalayaan sa ubang tao. Kiila ang Human Rights Committee nga dako kayo og nasakop. And then sa Article 13 prohibits the arbitrary expulsion of residents unless as requires such decisions to be able to be applied and reviewed. Sa Article 13, ginabawal ang pagpahawa sa mga dayo sa usa ka lugar kung walay desisyon sa taas or walay saktong papel para mapahawa sila. Now, thank you.
Article 17 mandates the right of privacy. This provision is specifically Article 17 protect private adult consensual sexual activity. thereby nullifying prohibition on homosexual behavior. However, the wording of these covenants, marriage right, Article 17, excludes the extrapolation of same-sex marriage right from this provision. Article 17 also protects people against unlawful attacks to their honor and reputation. Article 17 grants the protection of the law against such attacks. Next, Article 18 mandates freedom of religion of belief. Next, Article 19 mandates freedom of expression. Article 20 mandates sanction against inciting war and hatred. Article 21 mandates freedom of assembly and 22 mandates freedom of association. This provision guarantees the right of freedom of association, the right to trade union, and also defines the International Labour Organization. Next, Article 23 mandates the right of marriage. The wording of provision neither requires or prohibits same-sex marriage. Article 24 mandates special protection, the right to a name and the right to a nationality of for every child.
Political rights. Article 3 provides an accessory non-discrimination principle. Accessory in the way that it cannot be used independently and can only be relied in relation to another right protected by the Iccpr. In contrast, Article 26 contains a revolutionary norm by providing an autonomous equality principle which is not dependent upon another right under the convention being infringed. This has the effect of widening the scope of the non-discrimination principle beyond the scope of the Iccpr.
Optional protocols. There are two optional protocols of covenant. The first protocols establish an individual complaints mechanism allowing individual complaint to human rights committee about violation of covenant. This had to the creation of complex jurisprudence on interpretation and implementation of covenant. As September 19, the first optional protocols has 116 party lists. The second optional protocols abolish of death penalty. However, countries were permitted to make reservation allowing for use death penalty for the most serious of crime, a military committed during wartime. As of June 2022, the second optional protocols had 90 parties.
The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, an official summary. This covenant was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 16 December 1966 and entered into force on 23 March 1976. By May of 2012, the covenant had been ratified by 167 states. The covenant elaborates further the civil and political rights and freedoms listed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Under Article 1 of the covenant, the states commit themselves to promote the right to self-determination and to respect that right. It also recognizes the rights of people to freely own, trade, and dispose of their natural wealth and resources. Among the rights of individual granted by the covenant are Article 2, the rights to legal resource when their rights have been violated, even if the violator was acting in an official capacity. Article 3, the right to equality between men and women in the enjoyment of their civil and political rights. Article 6, the right to life and survival. Article 7, the freedom from inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 8, the freedom from slavery and servitude. Article 9, the right to liberty and security of the person and freedom from arbitrary arrest or detention. Article 11, the freedom from prison due to death. Article 12, the right to liberty of movement and freedom to choose residence. Article 14, the right to equality before the law, the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty and to have a fair and public hearing by an impartial tribunal. Article 16, the right to be recognized as person before the law. Article 17, the right to privacy and its protection by the law. Article 18, the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Article 19, the freedom of opinion and expression. Article 20, prohibition of propaganda advocating war or national, racial, or religious hatred. Article 21, the right to peaceful assembly. Article 22, the right to freedom of association. Article 23, the right to marry and found a family. Article 24, the rights for children, status as minors, nationality, registrations, and name. Article 25, the right to participate in the conduct of public affairs, to vote, to be elected, and access to a public service. Article 26, the right to equality before the law and equal protection. And Article 27, the right for members of religious, ethnic, or linguistic minorities to enjoy their culture, practice their religion, and use their language.